Next up is Skip Weisman, and he is a professional baseball executive and a professional keynote speaker. You know, it's funny, when Don was making that reference to Derek Jeter, I thought, wait a minute, who's the baseball professional? And that's actually Skip. So I thought that was kind of funny. Skip, you may have found that amusing as well. I don't know. At any rate, he is a professional keynote speaker, business coach, and consultant. He works with business owners, CEOs, executive teams, and nonprofit organization leaders, plus their employees, to create championship company cultures. Skip served as CEO of 5 baseball franchises, beginning at the age of 26. Skip's teams were affiliated with the Boston Red Sox, Cincinnati Reds, New York Mets, Seattle Mariners, Tampa Bay Ray. Is that Tampa Bay Ray? Is that right?
Tampa Bay Rays, like the Devil Rays.
Tampa Bay Rays, okay. And the Texas Rangers. So if people want to complain about the way these teams have performed, are you the person that they should complain to?
No, because I was in the minor league system, so I have no control with the major league teams.
Okay, fair enough. And since 2012, Skip has spoken on main stages as a keynote speaker to audiences as large as 1,500 at corporate and association conferences across North America. Some clients include the Project Management Institute, Society for Human Resource Management, Pink Elephant IT, great name, Service Management, Pink Elephant IT Service Management, HDI, the Medical Group Management Association, and George Mason University. And Skip is going to talk to us today about building your championship team culture. So Skip, you all set to go?
I believe so. I just have to share my screen, right?
Yep. And John will make you the presenter. I think we saw your screen for a minute. There you go.
Here. Make sure slideshow.
Yep. Right. And I will be back towards the end of your presentation. So looking forward to it.
Okay. All right. Why is my slideshow not going? Here we go. Oh, I'm in the way here. Hold on. Okay. Now you should see the slides up, right? Hopefully. Okay. Are we good to go? Give me some feedback.
You're good.
Yeah,
you're good.
The slides are up, correct?
We're great, Skip. Yep, got the full slide, got full screen on your slide.
Beautiful. Okay, let's dive in. Thank you for the great introduction, Cynthia. And let's move on here. So, we're talking about workplace and team cultures and even nonprofit club cultures and things like that. There's 2 ways that they develop. One is through default, which means it just sort of evolves. It happens just through how people are interacting and how people communicate and what the expectations are and how people manage those expectations and all that stuff. But it just sort of happens with no real forethought. And that's one way things develop in company culture, team, even on a sports team, and even in a Toastmasters club, as I've been involved with for the last, almost 20 years now. I think I joined my first Toastmasters club like in 1998, 1999. So that's pretty amazing. But you go to different clubs, they have different cultures, and most of them actually develop through default. What I try to help organizations do is develop a workplace culture that is designed to be the way we want it to be. The challenge is that 99.9% of our organizational cultures develop through default. And so think about yours. Has there been forethought given to the type of culture we want to create that will allow us and our people to be most successful? Most of us have not. We just sort of get into it and it evolves. And we wake up one day and figure out, we ask, how did we get here? And it's not the way we want it. And we have to then try to design it from redesign it, I guess is what you would say, from that point. And that's okay. And it can be done. And that's the work I do, because 99.9% of them develop through default. And so I come in and we begin designing it. Cynthia did a great introduction, so you don't need me to rehash who I am and where I came from. But I've been doing this work for the last 16 seasons. I left baseball after 2001, and so I don't do that anymore. And I just do this work full-time, coaching and speaking and writing and consulting with organizations to create these championship environments. I was fortunate enough to publish my first book in 2018. Don, it was a challenging experience. I can empathize with you as far as the challenges you're having in trying to write your book. But it was a long time coming, and I finally promised myself, and I guess created some motivation and made sure I got it published last year. It's called Overcoming the 7 Deadliest Communication Sins, which is the book that we're going to give away at the end of this presentation. And I'm hoping to work on my second book on this concept you're going to be learning about here today. So that's in the works. We'll start by telling a little story about a company organization culture that I worked with a few years ago. And this is a company called Utility Survey Corporation. And this is Gary, my good friend and former client, Gary, who was at a workshop that I was giving. And we had a spirited conversation during the presentation as he was sitting around the conference room table with about 10 of his peers. And he was really challenged with motivating his employees and asked me some things, and I went back at him and he didn't like my answers, and he was getting frustrated. And afterwards he came up to me and he said, you know, about 6 months ago I had to fire somebody who had been with me for about 6 years, and he was doing things that were putting the company at risk out in the field. And I'm really fed up with another employee who's been my longest term employee. He's been with me for 14 years, and that's Sean. And he was ready to fire Sean. He said, can you help me? I said, I don't know if I can help you. I need to learn more about the organization, what's going on in your work environment. And so we talked for a little while, and he brought me in to help him a little bit. And after working with him, we transformed the work environment, and we transformed Sean from somebody who was on the verge of being fired into being a peak performer in the organization. And it was all about the culture of the company and the way Gary was communicating with his people. Everything comes down to communication. You know, in the previous session, Don was talking about ourselves to be a certain way and to maintain that promise so we can trust ourselves and other people can trust us. And it all comes down to communication with ourselves and with others. And what we learned in this environment is that there was real issues around communications. So we transformed that. We got Gary and Sean communicating more effectively, and I'll tell you more about that as we move along. But when you change the culture and you design the culture you want it to be, you can transform the way people show up. But if you think about your environment that you work within on a regular basis, whether you own a company, lead a company, you're the leader of a small team, or you're running a Toastmasters chapter, what are the team member attitudes, behaviors, and performance issues that frustrate you the most? Think about that. You know, there's always things that come up that people say or do, or they text you, or you hear things second or third hand from folks. And what are those things that drive you crazy, that get in your way of being most effective, allowing you to lead your team more effectively? There's a lot of things that I hear from my business clients and the people who ask me to come talk to them about possibly working with them about the things that they stress with. One of the things that continually shows up is this Gallup survey. Gallup is always surveying people in the work environment, and they came out with a report in 2017 to update their most recent report. And the State of the American Workplace report showed that 33% of the U.S. workforce is engaged at work. Because if you're familiar with the Pareto principle, which is, most people know it as the 80-20 rule, and this really comes to fruition when we're talking about volunteer efforts or even in Toastmasters clubs, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Right? You're probably familiar with that. And so it's not surprising that probably 20% of the workforce is engaged at work. So the Gallup study is actually better than it probably should be, right? But it's still not good enough. You only have a third of a workforce, or a third, or even 20% of your team doing what they need to do. That's a lot of wasted energy and resources. But what I hear business owners tell me is that employees put pay before performance. performance. They resist change and new technology. Think about Toastmasters and the whole shift to the Pathways program and how that is drastically different from the way we used to run Toastmasters clubs and move through the Toastmasters program, right? So many of us are sort of resisting change, and it's taken me a while to get up to speed with it as well, for a lot of reasons. But we all have this attitude that sometimes holds us back. You have people in your team or your organization that lack attention to detail. They don't follow through the way you need them to. There's no sense of urgency. Many times we require micromanaging. You got to stay on people. It's exhausting. What about those people with the not my job or the control issues? They don't collaborate and they're not team players. Gossip, rumor mill that is rampant in many, many organizations. And just an overall general negative attitude. Now, I, just like Don and some others in this program, love to work with acronyms. And so I was putting this program together. And this is new content for this new year. I try to always put one new program together each year to keep my content fresh and to keep me thinking and being a thought leader. And so for this program, when I was working on it over the holidays, I created an acronym for this type of attitude and behaviors that team members show up with. And I call it a DIRT character. And this is not to say that the people are dirt, because I don't like labeling people in that way. As you'll see, I have a very strong, powerful belief about people and what they're capable of. But the character in the present moment, I'd character as dirt. And you'll see how it flows with all these challenges that we have. One, they're distracted. Right? They lack attention to detail. They need constant reminding of things. They may lack punctuality and things like that. E is they're egocentric. Right? It's all about them. They're just focused on pay before performance. They want and expect recognition and acknowledgement just for showing up, or they have that entitlement mentality where they expect that raise, bonus, or some type of reward because they've been around for so long. They're resistant to new ideas, right? We've always done it this way. We want to keep things that way. We don't invest in new technology and developing ourselves for that, and we resist any type of new idea or something. And then the last is they're territorial. It's us versus them. They see things as a zero-sum game. They're threatened possibly by newcomers in the organization, and oftentimes they control information so they can maintain their ego and maintain their level of significance and importance. So you may have noticed some common themes here with the people that you interact and engage with. So you may be asking yourself a question like Gary did. If you're the organizational leader, what can I do as a leader to get the people on my teams to do what I need them to do and what I'm paying them for if you're in a business, or what you need them to do to help them develop for themselves? And and Sarah did a great program on on influencing, how people get to say yes when you need them to do things. So overall, the goal really is we want our team members to think, feel, and act like owners, so they take ownership of their role, and whatever that role is, even if it's a volunteer role. And we want them to have the confidence to take interest in the best interest of the whatever organization or practice that we're running. That's really want to get people to. And you've learned some great things already today in the other 3 sessions that can help you do that, from emotional intelligence to influence and being able to trust ourselves and hold ourselves accountable to the commitments that we make. But here's another thing to think about. Over time, what strategies and techniques have you tried to transform these attitudes, behaviors, and performance issues? You've probably tried a lot of things, and hopefully the programs we've given you today will give you more opportunities to try some different things. But there's a challenge, because most of this stuff doesn't work and doesn't get you the results. That's why you're here, trying to learn other influencing skills. What most people tell me in the job, or even in the Toastmasters clubs where we try to have performance reviews, or at least goal setting reviews, and see where do you want to go with this, and how can we get you inspired to aspire to something greater for your speaking development. One-on-one conversations, right, which oftentimes, even especially in Toastmasters clubs I've seen, have become Groundhog Day conversations where they're the same over and over again, and nothing seems to change, nothing seems to get better. People are just sort of plodding along. Team or group meetings, right? We try to facilitate those, and we get people to nod their heads, and we feel good at the end of the meeting. And again, it becomes Groundhog Day because nothing ever changes, even though we thought we had buy-in and commitment, right? We do positive feedback, we do constructive feedback, and that may or may not get you short-term compliance for a little while. We may try raises, bonuses, other incentives if we're in a work business environment. So I want to talk about human psychology. This is Psych 101. If you've gone to college and you've taken any psych classes at all, maybe even basic high school psychology, you're familiar with B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov. And so we're going to talk about conditioning, because I don't believe in all the motivational theories that I've seen for the work environment and for teams. I don't really see people going back to the basics. And what I've learned in doing the work with my clients is that we can transform the character of people if we change the conditions in the work environment, because conditions in the environment are conditioning people to show up a certain way with a certain character. And it starts with operant conditioning, and operant conditioning basically means it's your rewards and punishment system type of stimulus, positive or negative, to create a voluntary response. And this works in any type of animal, human beings especially, because that's why we pay people. That's why we we try to reward children with some type of allowance if they do chores and things like that. We're providing a stimulus to get a response. Sometimes it's negative, it's punishment, or it's a reward to try and change somebody's voluntary behavior. The problem with this, and we've seen this in most environments, is that I believe there's a 67% risk of getting this wrong, because there's really only three possible outcomes. One, it's working and it's building trust and respect and good feelings, and it says, yeah, this is a really good reward, and I'm going to do this thing for all the right reasons, and I voluntarily move in the direction that somebody wants me to based on that stimulus. But it's more likely these two other things are going to happen. It's going to create a negative response in the person, and it's going to undermine that trust relationship that Don talked about. And I may do it for short-term compliance, but it's not going to last long because I'm not buying into it. Or the third response is I'm just going to outright reject it. Those are the only three outcomes you have, the only three possible choices that are going to happen when you try this operant conditioning. And we've experienced it. So again, we only have a 33% chance of getting it right, which may be why there's only 33% engagement level in the workplace today. Something to think about, right? I wonder, it's interesting how that equates to the same. So if we're using these type of rewards and punishment, is it working? And do we have to try something else? I spoke about Gary and Sean and one of my clients. I'm going to offer you another client to talk about their situation and how we changed the character of the people and in the peer groups, really. 25 employees, 7 people in the office, 18 in the machine shop doing all the manufacturing. Of the 7 in the office, there were 6 organizational leaders and 1 basic receptionist or admin person. 3 leadership team members could not get along at all, and I mean they could not sit together without getting into an argument. The other 3 kept their heads down to try and stay away from everything, and the president, Justin, tolerated it all because he really didn't know what to do. 50% or more of the 18 in the machine shop absolutely hated and resented the head of manufacturing who was on this leadership team. My job that they brought me in to do is to transform an extremely toxic, unhealthy work environment. And what had been conditioned over years through really this operant conditioning of rewards and punishment, and mostly it was punishment that got negative results, negative responses, was consistent negative communication between everybody. People were yelling at each other in the hallways, chasing people down, cursing at them, using all sorts of profanity right in the open in the work environment. And it was just a cesspool for more than 10 years. I don't know how people went to work every day and survived and even didn't drive themselves crazy or shoot themselves here or somebody go in there with going postal. It was that bad. Worst environment I've ever seen. But we worked together to change these conditions, and we changed people's behavior. And you're going to learn about that towards the end as I talk about the results by changing the conditions in the work environment, and we were able to change the character. So think about this. What are the ideal attitudes and behaviors you want from your team members? Think about that. Think about the most important one, just one. What would you say might be the one thing that would make the biggest difference if these people brought this trait into your environment? What's the ideal trait for your ideal Toastmasters member? right? Obviously, it's probably somebody that really buys into it and takes on leadership roles early on, and helps build the culture, right? But what are those attitudes that you want in your team members? Because we have to define it before we can get it. Right? We have to define it to design it so we can move forward. What most organization leaders tell me is that the things that they're asking for, again, I've created an acronym around it, which starts, no surprise, with the letters CHAMP. So you want people that are committed. You want people that are humble. And again, we've talked a lot about humility in these sessions, and being able to be humble and to show up with humility that allows us to grow and learn. You want people that are accountable. You want people that are motivated and have high morale and bring that great attitude to the work environment. And I like this word, which is perspicacious. If you don't know what it is, I'll tell you in just a second, but it's a really powerful word from my perspective. And it's the type of people most business leaders and organizational leaders tell me they want in their people. So the first is C is committed, right? They see, they like, and they are inspired by the bigger picture. It's easy to have them do what you need them to do, and if you're paying them for what you're paying them for, and they'll do more, and they'll ask for more because they want to contribute at a high level because they're committed to the vision, the mission, and the purpose of the organization. Second is humble. Oh, I have a typo there. Sorry about that. Humble. They know they can always get better. They're driven to learn and grow. They crave constructive and positive feedback. One thing I talk about from a champion perspective, and I use the sports metaphor all the time. My website is yourchampionshipcompany.com, and I fall back on my 20 years of baseball experience and my 50 years of being a lifetime sports fan. But in order to win a championship, we have to be humble. There's no more cocky people and overconfident people than athletes, especially major league athletes, professional athletes. But there's a paradox there, because not only are they confident and cocky and somewhat over the top confident, they are also extremely humble from a perspective of knowing that they have to continually get better. And there's not enough of that in the rest of the world, because they have a drive. They are committed to be the best they can be. And they know if we're going to win a championship, the competition just keeps getting tougher along the way, right? So we need to be humble to continue to look for ways that we can grow and get better. Accountable. We want people that like to set goals, that want to push themselves and stretch themselves, people that look for solutions when things aren't going well. They don't make excuses, and they take responsibility for how they show up with their attitude, their behavior, and their performance level. They're motivated by themselves, right? They're driven to succeed internally. They bring ideas, right, for individual improvement, but also organizational improvement. They're always looking for how to do things better. They have a positive can-do attitude, and even more importantly, a what can I do attitude to support the effort. Perspective. Being able to have a perspective on the world that looks ahead and is a problem solver. We think ahead to make decisions. We have great insights on where the world is going, where the business is going, because we invest time and energy to look for these things. This I bring to my clients when they tell me, "Oh God, I wish people would stop just dumping problems on me." And if they have a problem, they come to me, but not just with the problem, but they come to me with some solutions that they've thought through. That's what perspicacious is. It means that they're looking ahead, they have a great perspective, and they think ahead to make decisions and solve problems. They just don't dump problems on other people. Imagine if you had team members in whatever your team environment is that had these 5 champ traits, and what difference that would make. That's really what my clients are looking for, and I think most team leaders are looking for, these 5 powerful traits. But how do we get them? How do we condition this type of behavior? Well, for that, I think we have to really look at the concept of classical conditioning and Ivan Pavlov. If you, again, studied Psych 101 even in college or high school, the basics is we hear about Ivan Pavlov Pavlov's dogs. Well, all human beings are just like Pavlov's dogs. B.F. Skinner worked with operant conditioning, where we had positive and negative rewards to create voluntary behavior. What Pavlov's research did was talk about involuntary behavior. How can we create an environment and create the conditions that create people to respond involuntarily in the way we want them to? So Pavlov was studying salivation and digestive processes in dogs. And he came upon this result really just through by surprise when he started tying a bell to the delivery of the food. So we know that when a dog sees food, they're going to salivate. Well, what he did is he ended up bringing a bell, a buzzer or whatever it was, at the time that the food was going to be delivered. And over time, the dogs associated the bell with food coming, and they would start salivating before the food was presented because they were anchored to this bell. And that bell became a neutral stimulus that created an involuntary response. And over time, Pavlov conditioned these dogs to salivate at the sounding of the bell. That there are conditions in every environment, every team environment, every family environment, every Toastmasters Club environment, that cause people to react and respond involuntarily. It becomes our default way of responding in environments, and it's causing our biggest problems. I really believe that it's some of these neutral stimuluses that create involuntary responses in people. We create an anchor to certain stimulus that cause us to involuntarily respond. I mean, it could be as much as, you know, another human being, right? If we don't get along with somebody, or somebody has said or done something to us, and we think there's malicious intent, the next time we walk into a room with them and we see their face, it's really a neutral stimulus. Hasn't been meant to drive any certain behavior. It's just who they are. It's just what they look like. But you've been anchored to that neutral response, that neutral stimulus, and it creates an involuntary response in you, which sometimes often is not as positive as you want or it should be, right? And so all of these things are working in a work environment that cause involuntary responses in people, and that is what I believe causes some of these negative characteristics, the dirt character in people, to show up. Here's another good example. I think that is it's very, very close to this classical conditioning in the dog and the bell. Working with this small insurance company, had 10 employees, two partners, and they were shifting us to new ownership. They went through a succession plan. 2 new partners were taking over, and they were really concerned about leading these new leaders, leading their people, but also about overcoming this complacency on the staff that they had been feeling for quite some time. And they wanted me to help them develop a more proactive, motivated team. And they were concerned because people, over time, what I learned is that there was really a lack of direction in the work environment. A lot of assumptions were being made about employees, about what they were capable of doing and who they were and what their character was and what they might be able to contribute into the future. And this one woman, Thomasine, who was the receptionist, they really were concerned with how she would respond to the new ownership, and it was somewhat complacent. She would just do the same thing over and over again, and she was conditioned to be this way. So what she was doing was, anytime a phone call would come in, she would do her job as a receptionist, and she would just move forward calls to whoever needed to take the call. So she thought. So in insurance, there's commercial lines, there's personal lines, and there's health benefits is what they had. 3 different departments. And these people would call in and they would say what they needed, and she would just automatically forward them to these departments. And a lot of the things that she was forwarding on, she could actually triage and take care of at her level. But nobody ever asked her to do this. All she thought her job was to send the calls to the departments where they were supposed to go. And they were afraid of asking her to do more because they didn't think she was capable, and she didn't think she had the attitude to do it. But for years and years, that was the expectation. And so she got conditioned. Every time the phone would ring, hi, I need this, boom, it goes to this department. And she would just forward it on. Everybody was really concerned with her and didn't know what to do. And they didn't think she was going to be able to make the transition to the new ownership and new expectations. What I want to impress upon you is that it's conditions that create character in team members. And we have to create the right conditions to condition the character, just like Pavlov and just like B.F. Skinner. It's conditioning. Conditions, over time, we can use conditioning to create the character that we want in people. So how do we do that? And where does this come from? And what are the right conditions for a work environment and organizational environment? Well, in researching this and reading a lot of books on this, Gallup does a lot of research, and there's another smaller company who does just as big research that very few people know about. It's called Sirota Survey Intelligence, and they've written 2 books called The Enthusiastic Employee. The most recent one is 2013, and they updated all their research from the 90s about this in 2005 to 2010. And all of the research was, they did like 1.3 million surveys of different level employees in large corporations. And what they found is that there was 3 things. They identified 3 things. Everybody likes to work in threes. 3 things that really impacted environments that allowed enthusiastic employees to show up. And I think this is fascinating, especially when you see how common it is in some other research in another book I'm going to tell you about. So equity. Now, they define this as equity. I don't really like this name for a label for this character trait of the work environment, but it's your basic needs of safety, reasonable job security are met. People are treated with respect. There's empathy to personal and family issues, and people feel supported in all the right ways. For some reason, they called it equity. Secondly is achievement. Right? People want challenging work. They want to learn new skills. They want to make sure that they're supported and there's resources to do the job so they can bring the best of themselves. Their job is perceived as important by themselves or co-workers and company leaders. And they believe in the organization. They believe in the products and the contributions. Right? And that's one thing that we have with Toastmasters is people believe in the product and they believe in what Toastmasters is contributing to the community and to the world at large, and they want to be part of that, and they want to have some level of achievement as they move through the Pathways programs. So it fits too, right? We want positive, warm, interesting, and cooperative places to work and people to work with, and we want to develop that sense of camaraderie. That's one level of research around this, which is Sirota Survey Intelligence and the Enthusiastic Employee. Another book that reinforces this with some different labels, but basically the same concepts, is Daniel Pink. And you may have heard of Daniel Pink. He's a great author. He's written 5 or 6 best-selling New York Times books. The one that I'm referring to here is called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And he did all this anecdotal research, talking to the best places to work and companies that were really doing different things and unique things in their work environment to get motivated employees. And he also found that there were 3 things in a 21st century environment that created people who would show up with all the right characteristic traits. And his 3 things were defined a little bit differently, but very similarly. So he said mastery. Mastery is about providing the opportunity to pursue what we're good at, working to our strengths, pursuing learning and growth, and always looking to get even better. People want that, and organizations that provide that for people are going to thrive and get people. And I think that bodes well for Toastmasters, certainly, right? We have that because we're all about the pursuit of mastery in speaking and leading skills. The second is autonomy, and I love this one because human beings are self-directed people. We don't want people to control us. We want to have control over our own lives. We also need to be able to control our own situations in the workplace or on teams or in the environment. I think Pathways is really cool and a much better way to do that these days because it can be self-directed learning. But we want to be able to control our environments and how we do our jobs and how we move through the world. We're autonomous creatures. And the last one is purpose. The environment provides and prioritizes higher meaning and purpose, that we're making a difference in our customers, in the world in general, and in each other. Organization prioritizes purpose over profits, and we believe that purpose drives profits. So you can see, I think, that there's similarities between Sirota's 3 and Daniel Pink's 3. And for that reason, I sort of brought them all together and created my own. And I broke it down to 6. One is purpose. The second is autonomy. The third is achievement. The fourth is respect. And the fifth is camaraderie. And this spells PARC as another acronym, P-A-R-C. But if we're just focusing on purpose, autonomy, and achievement, I think we lose sight of the fact that we have to have respect. And that was in the equity component of Sirota's research and their 3 traits. And I really think it almost really begins and ends with respect. If we don't have respect, if we don't develop that high respect relationship with the people in our environment, they're going to turn away. Don talked about trust. Trust is so important. And I think trust is a stepping stone to respect. You can't really respect people unless you trust them. But I think you can trust people that you don't respect, especially the way they do things. I think respect is a higher level that we have to shoot for. If we don't have a respectful work environment, and people don't feel that they're respected for what they bring and who they are just as human beings, it's going to be tough to motivate them and have them bring the best of themselves. So if we're fostering purpose, autonomy, achievement, respect, and camaraderie, that's going to give you the best chance to condition the right character from employees. And one of the things that's really important from a camaraderie standpoint, from building the right teams, we have to make sure that the compensation and the recognition are designed to reinforce individual efforts to team achievement. And what I mean by that is, in sports, when a team wins a championship, all the rewards are the same. Most organizations reward individuals much differently at very different levels and expect them to collaborate and work together when the rewards are not equal. And if I believe that somebody else is going to get more at the end if we achieve this than I am, I'm not going to share resources with them because they're going to get more, and I see this as a zero-sum game, where if we can create an environment where all the rewards are the same, or all the rewards are at least equitable, that allows teamwork to thrive. And we have to be very careful with how we create this. Otherwise, you're going to go back into the negative influence. But sports teams, even though there's different salary levels in professional sports teams, and some athlete may be making $20 million a year, and one may be making $1 million a year, the salaries are what they are, but the reward for winning the team championship is exactly the same. Athletes get the ring. Athletes get a bonus, and it's the same bonus for everybody, like the World Series share for everybody on the Boston Red Sox in October who won was the same. It was like $300,000. They all get that same $300,000 regardless of the role that they played on the team. And third, they get to label themselves a champion, which allows them to market themselves to other teams at a higher level once you have that label. So all of the rewards are the same, and they're aligned to provide teamwork and to allow people to want to collaborate in teams. Most organizations' rewards are not equitable in that fashion. So this is classical conditioning, operant conditioning in the environment. You've got these 5 characteristics that we want to create, these 5 conditions that we want to bring into the work environment that create the best workplace conditions. And over time, we can use conditioning to be in the work environment consistently over time. That will build the character that we want. That will build this champ character that we want. And it becomes a symbiotic relationship that over time reinforces itself. Because imagine if you had a team of people that brought this champ team character into the environment all the time. what's going to happen is that's going to reinforce the conditions, and it's going to raise the level and raise the expectation of the conditions, and it becomes self-perpetuating. Because as the conditions continue to be refined and get even better in these 5 areas, that's going to continue the conditioning, and it builds the positive team characteristics. And it also will allow you to recruit much better on the front end to ensure that you now bring these these team members in with the right characteristics that you're looking for. It's really powerful once this system gets working in environments, because it's self-perpetuating, and you start attracting and recruiting and bringing the right people into the environment. So let's talk about what happened with these guys. So in working with Sean and Gary and his team of about 8 employees, small little group, we created this championship game vision, which we called the $1 Million Challenge. They were a $660,000 company, a really small company. When I met them, we created this $1 Million Challenge. Within 1 year, we got up to about $880,000. So we had like a 30% growth 1 year. And then after 3 years, they achieved their $1 million goal. We gave Sean more responsibility, not less. We had to stop the micromanaging to give Sean greater sense of autonomy in what he was doing in the work environment. We provided incentives to achieve some marketing and financial goals that everybody participated in. Respect. This is the biggest thing. We provided greater transparency on financials for the company, so that all team members understood what the reality was. But we treated people with respect in the way that we let them see these things that nobody else had ever shared before. And also in giving people greater autonomy, that communicated greater respect. And the last, we created incentives that reinforce collaboration and teamwork. And once we achieved this $1 Million Challenge, Gary was unbelievably generous and provided equal benefits for everybody at the end of the year when they achieved their $1 Million Challenge. Micromold, Justin, and one of my best clients here with this situation with a very toxic work environment, we did the same thing. We created a championship game vision. What I always ask, what is your World Series? What is your Super Bowl? Their championship game vision was to be a $5 million company in 5 years and be an emotionally rewarding, emotionally and financially rewarding place to work. They were a $3 million company when we went in there. They just finished this year at just around 3.5. So they've had really great growth, and they're doing well. And that's because of the collaboration and how we changed people's attitudes. We gave all leadership new responsibilities and focus. We changed their titles. We actually gave them a department to run. Before, it was rather ambiguous as to who had responsibilities for what, but we've really streamlined everybody's responsibilities and gave them a title that gives them a directorship over their department that they never had before, and things are much more clear now, and they feel like they have autonomy over their departments and their areas. We created 2 6-month windows for measurable goals. They never had this before, and so last year we did 2 6-month windows. This year we're accelerating it, and we're going to do 4 90-day goal setting time periods, and then we're going to give them rewards at the end of 90 days for achieving their goals. And everybody's really bought into it. They embraced the goal setting for the first time in 2019 when we did it this week. Respect. We trained and coached everybody on championship communication skills because, quite frankly, they didn't know how to communicate with each other without getting into fights and arguments. So I had to do some almost remedial training on communication skills, so everybody felt as if they were communicated with respect. And camaraderie, we didn't focus on that so much as we did. We believe that if we did the other stuff, camaraderie and collaboration would work, and it absolutely has. It was really, I was with them yesterday for half a day, and it was amazing to see how they were starting to communicate with each other in a group setting. People that couldn't get along are now agreeing with each other in meetings and bouncing off ideas with each other in the meetings. It's very, very rewarding. And to like it more, we did the same thing. We created this championship game vision of 10% top line growth within 3 years. And they create this really interesting, powerful purpose, which is to enable people to live the lives that they want, because they're insurance and they need to give people the peace of mind. Again, we gave people autonomy. We set expectations, and we said, this is what we need from you, and we let them do it. And we didn't manage them, and people stepped up. The entire team and the partners create a whole new core set of core values around how people promise to treat each other, which is pretty unusual. But it was all around respect, and that was what the core values were around, because everybody wanted to feel respected, and they didn't feel respected to this point. And we took those core values and we transformed them into a team agreement where everyone bought into it. Everybody signed the agreement and agreed to be held accountable to it. And we set up collaboration opportunities both inside and outside the environment. So here's something that we need to believe to make this work, whatever your environment is. Champ character is in every team member in your organization. And your job as an organizational leader is to figure out how to bring it out of them. And you bring it out of them by creating the right conditions, which I believe are purpose, autonomy, achievement, respect, and camaraderie. And when you bring those into your work environment and you condition it over time, the output will be champ character in your team members. And again, as I showed earlier, it is a self-perpetuating, reinforcing model here that absolutely works. So let's talk about 3 steps to making this happen for your championship company or championship organization. First, you have to decide. You have to decide that you want to design this environment. I call it your ideal championship environment. And ideal is a 5-step acronym. The second step after you decide is to dedicate. Dedicate the time, the energy, the resources, and most importantly, the belief in your people to make it happen. And it's not a small dedication and not a small investment. And then the third is, once you get the first 2 Ds, you want to define to design. Define to design. You define your individual and cultural team characteristics. You can take my 5 park characteristics, or you can create your own for your own work environment, whatever those cultural traits are that you need to move towards creating your ideal teamwork, and identify the character traits that you want from your team members. It could be my champ. Feel free to borrow my champ of committed, humble, accountable, motivated, and perspicacious, or create your own 5 character traits. Just get clarity around that. You can define them to design them, and begin moving in that direction. If you'd like a little help with this and you want to learn more about the ideal championship work environment, I created a thing called the Ideal Championship Work Environment Playbook. You can simply send a text IDEAL, IDEAL, to 66866 for a free downloadable copy of the Ideal Championship Environment Playbook. And that will help you move through these 3 steps, but there's 5 in the ideal environment. I'm going to wrap this up with just 2 final thoughts. In order for this to work, you must believe in the best of people. No matter how bad somebody's character is, how they're showing up, if you believe in the best of people in general, they will respond to you when the right conditions are in place. Justin, the one who was leading this toxic manufacturing company, was unbelievable with this. When we would have meetings, then somebody's name would come up about buying into this concept and where we're going, and 1 or 2 people say, "Oh, they're never going to do it. They're just too negative. They're impossible. They're nasty people." Justin would sit back and say, "We don't know that yet. We haven't created the environment to help support them in moving and becoming who we need them to be." It was his belief in the best of people was unwavering for the last 2 years. And it's paid dividends. When we believe in the best of people, you will get the best of people, because conditions create character. When you believe that the conditions that people are involved with create their character, cause them to bring a certain character into the environment, you change the conditions, you change the character. So I hope you've learned something here on this session that will help you create championship team cultures in whatever your environment is, whether it be a work environment or your Toastmasters Club environment. I ask you, look at how your conditions are creating the character of your people, and identify the conditions that can change it. And if you need my help, happy to help in any way I can. So I think that's it on the webinar.
Terrific. Great, Skip. I got a lot out of what you were talking about. I found it really interesting that the idea of challenging people to look at whether or not they are creating an organization by default. And they're just going along with what's there. They're not really thinking about how they're creating it. They're not really setting intentions about where they want to be, what the characteristics are that they need for their people to be successful within that environment, as opposed to really being dedicated to designing something with specific cultural traits that's going to let the business succeed and give the people within that business, that corporate culture, a belief in something that's bigger than themselves. And I just want to read a quick quote here from Daniel Pink, who I'm a big fan of. He says, "I think people get satisfaction from living for a cause that's greater than themselves. They want to leave an imprint." And I think by following this design, you're very specific, you're intentional, you want your culture to be successful either financially or through the works that they do. You can create a culture in which the people feel not only empowered, but as if they are connected to something that is meaningful, that they're putting something out into the community that's of value. And I think that's a very strong place to come from. So I really enjoyed this, and I want to thank you for giving us a terrific presentation. It is now time for us to give away your book, and John's going to jump on here. We're going to challenge him, and I can't hear you, so I'm not sure if your microphone, are you there? Skip? I can't hear you, so can you say something so we can tell whether or not you're on mic? Skip, can you hear me?
Oh, me? Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
I thought you were talking to John. Okay.
All right. No, I was talking to you, but sorry for not communicating clearly. John, you with us?
I'm here.
All right. You got your big job cut out for you here. Skip is going to choose a number, and you're going to tell us what numbers not to choose. And it can be anything from 1 to 63. So, Skip.
We are not going to choose 1. We are not going to choose 28. We're not going to choose 17.
Okay. So anything other than that. What's our number? Drum roll.
41.
41.
41.
41.
Very good. The ice fishing team and I will be working on that while we have Q&A.
Excellent. And hopefully you will catch something and serve lunch after we figure out who the winner is. Okay, before we jump into the Q&A section, I want to just do something that's a little fun. And Skip, I'm going to ask you your table topics question. And that is, would you rather jump out of a plane or go scuba diving, and why?
That's a great question, because I've actually done both. And I would want to do scuba diving again. I've done it a number of times. I've jumped out of a plane twice. I've done scuba diving a half a dozen times. What I've found in scuba diving is, I wanted to be an astronaut as a child, because back in the day, the Apollo space program and everything was really inspiring to me. But that's never going to happen. But what I learned in the couple times I've scuba dived, that's the closest thing to feeling like you're in outer space. You're weightless sort of down there. It's so quiet. It's so peaceful down there. I just love being on 30, 50, 60 feet underwater like that. So I love scuba diving. And it's the closest I'm ever going to get to being an astronaut, I think. So
beautiful. Okay, well, let's jump into some questions and answers here. From Samantha, any suggestions for creating a purpose goal that's not profit related? I lead a team that provides internal support at a nonprofit. It's time to get to set
Mhm.
annual goals, but I'm having trouble setting a team goal.
Yeah, that's a great question because everybody's focused on the profit thing. What Justin created for the micromold company, which I thought was really great, was he wanted to create um, an emotionally and financially rewarding place to work. And so the financial side of it was really sort of generic. It wasn't all that important to him. He really focused on the emotional side of things. Um, and Anthony and more, Vince and the team at the insurance company on creating an environment that allowed our customers to live the lives they wanted to live. Now it's a company that's a for-profit company, but their purpose is something higher. And this came to me in my baseball days too, in that I did this with my last team I was with, and our owner was very focused on the financials and a profit center and making money at the end of the year. And so when I asked this question, what is our purpose? At least half of the staff agreed with the fact that it was to make money for the owner. And what I told them was that, no, that's not our purpose. Our purpose has to be something else so that we can make money for the owner. If we're not fulfilling our purpose, nobody's going to buy tickets. Nobody's going to keep coming back. Nobody's going to buy our merchandise. So what is that purpose? And what we created out of that conversation was to make magical moments and memories for our community. If we made magical moments and memories for our community, we had fathers and sons and grandparents coming out to enjoy our ball games, they would keep coming back and would create a long-term fan base. If we didn't do that, nobody would care. And so our purpose for the baseball team, even though we were supposed to be a profit center for the owner, was to create magical moments and memories for our community. So if you're in a nonprofit, your organization already has a purpose and a mission. And if you have a division or a department, how does that department or division support the bigger purpose? Right? And you can riff and play off of that. Most purposes should not be financially driven, because unless you're fulfilling your purpose, you're not going to drive the revenue and the income you need. You're serving the wrong purpose.
Great.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Well, we're running out of time here. We're pushing down towards the end, so I'm sorry we're not going to be able to take more questions. At this time, let's go ahead and find out from John who the winner is.
So the winner of raffle number 4 is Miriam Olivares. Miriam Olivares, you are a winner of raffle number 4. You'll receive an email from us. We'll be asking for shipping instructions, and we'll get your book out to you as soon as we can.